YT Productions.
Yeah. I love my HBCU. And boy, I love it, love it. I love it, love it. I love my HBCU. And man, I hope my team they won one. I hope my team they won one. Yeah, man. I hope my team they won one. I hope my team they won one. I tune into the HBCU Sports Lab to see if my team won or lost. If they lost, I'm quiet as a mouse. But if they won, keep tab. I'ma do the dab, yeah. Dr. Cavil, he know what he be talking about. Mike and Charles, they know what they be talking about. They compress the analytic data with your hip hop. If you know them like I know them, they gon' tell you if your team, if they won or lost, and who the ball. So listen to Professor, yes sir, and pay attention, cause he gon' teach a lesson. And you gon' learn today, you gon' learn today how your team they play, how they play, boy. You gon' learn today how your team they play, how they play, yeah. We represent that SWAC, that MEAC, and let me say, what's up to Tennessee, stay. You tune into the HBCU Sports Lab with Dr. Cavil, Mike and Charles.
This is Dr. Cavil with Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington and Charles Bishop coming to you live, kicking it off a little late, but we'll get those 15 minutes back. So we'll give you a full hour of all the dynamics. It's a big day. It's a big day. A lot of things going on. We can go in a lot of different directions. But before I give the intro, let me just ask Charles, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Doc. I'm doing well. I had to show off the wife's alma mater today, little Russ College Bearcat. So definitely want to send a shout out to Russ College and On the Yard, HBCU and Greek apparel. You know, we talk about once we get into talking about name, image, and likeness, we got to start taking a look at some of those businesses that we do business with. You know, the economic opportunity that's there for those individuals. So, you know, definitely want to shout them out.
No point. I mean, great point, I should say. So again, what is the name of the apparel? Where did you get the merchandise?
On the Yard, HBCU Greek and apparel. They are located in Memphis, Tennessee. So I definitely want to shout them out in terms of Veronica Bobo's business. Legacy Pride Tradition Shop, ontheyard.com. So sent a couple of pieces down to me and the better half, little Russ College action. I got me a Jackson State sweatshirt as well. So appreciative of Miss Bobo for what she provided.
No doubt. Tell her I'm gonna go check out the website and see what I can find. See if I can find me some good gear to get on there, so I can come on the show and look good like my partner here. Welcome to episode 152 of Inside HBCU Sports Lab radio show and podcast. The show that's covering the sporting HBCU dash for all things HBCU sports, from institutions large and small, from NAIA to the NCAA. We share insights and information on the sport, HBCU sports culture, and HBCU athletic aesthetics to facilitate the story of HBCU athletic programs and the business of HBCU sports. I'm your host, Dr. Kenyatta Cavil, along with my co-host, Mike Washington and Charles Bishop. As you see, Mike Washington is still out on assignment. I'm not sure if it's part of his fishing assignment, if he's gone fishing, or is he just at business. We'll find out. We are filming from our home studios and sending a signal live to KCOH 1230 AM studios with Texas Radio Hall of Famer Ralph Cooper in the beautiful home of Texas Southern University from Houston, Texas. Today's episode of Inside the HBCU Sports Lab is sponsored by THD Agency. THD Agency is a company that provides sporting and educational consulting and data analytics. There's so many directions we can go. I didn't even get into bringing somebody in because I didn't want to slight everybody. Yeah. I mean, literally can start off. Grambling State Athletics is pleased to welcome Dr. Travian Scott, Vice President for Intercollegiate Athletics. If you're familiar with that name, you should be dealing with the SWACs at HBCU. He was formerly the Deputy Athletic Director and CFO of Southern University. Or you can talk about Bethune-Cookman and FAMU becoming official members of the SWAC. Or you can talk about, this is the first day for Texas Southern University's new president, Madam President, as many people say out there, is Dr. Leslie Crumpton Young, Texas Southern University's 13th president, or you can talk about North Carolina A&M becoming official members of the Big South Conference. And that may not even be the big news of the day, as you talking about NCAA, their announcement that now you can, in fact, have your right for name, image, and likeness. And it goes without saying that an HBCU individual or associated with the HBCU, Jackson State's defensive end, becomes the first college athlete to sign endorsement deals, or at least according to HBCUsports.com and Jackson State University. And if he's not the first, he certainly was one of the first ones to sign dotted line, as he did it at midnight. And you had a couple of them coming out there around midnight, 12:01, 12:02, getting into it. And by now, you've seen the bonanza. So I'm going to ask you, Charles, where do you want to start? And as I talk about the official announcement of FAMU and Bethune-Cookman, you have the fact that FAMU announces a 5-year deal with Influencer to become the second HBCU to be included on that platform. That was announced yesterday. So it's so much hot on July 1st. I don't know what was magic about July 1st, but without a doubt, it seems a lot of folks decided to go in some direction with that. Where you want to go first?
Yeah, I mean, let's start. I mean, with the historic date, it is July 1st, and I like to say it was a few schools they got their Greek letters today. FAMU and Bethune-Cookman, they got their letters today. They got their SWAC letters. North Carolina A&T, they got their Big South letters. Or if you're a fan of Letterman jackets, FAMU and BCU, they got their SWAC Letterman jackets today. So, it was very historic in terms of the formal process of them officially becoming members of the Southwestern Athletic Conference. Florida A&M, huge big press conference today with regards to Dr. McClellan being down there as well. So shout out to those institutions in terms of all that they've done to make themselves members of these new conferences. It's just a historic day. And that's not even getting into the NIL stuff. This was huge today with regards to the culture of HBCU athletics, of HBCUs in general, because we've talked about this before. Looking at the SWAC now, we're looking at a mega conference, a super conference, if you will. So this is huge.
No doubt about it. We'll get a chance to touch on all of those topics. We have a full hour, so we'll be able to get it all in. But since you wanted to go there first, let's talk about that. FAMU, Bethune-Cookman. FAMU went all in.
Yeah.
They did a full day, and it's still going on now. They started out this morning, 10 o'clock Central Time, 11 o'clock there, where they had a media press conference. And they literally had all the dignitaries. When I say they had all the dignitaries, and they let them all speak and share. And it was a blast. It was hysterical. I mean, everybody from the president, obviously VP of Athletics, Courtney Boucher. You had the board chair there. You had the basketball coach, men's and women's, head football coach, Willie Simmons. You had the SDA president. You had a football player. In terms of the SACS representative, who happens to be a football player for the conference. You had the county individual that helped designate money associated with Bragg Stadium. He had some words, and he might have had some of the best words of the day. So if you ain't got a chance, go to FAMU Athletics, and it's worth your entertainment value to talk about that. And they had the commissioner, Dr. Charles McCullough, there. He did his. So it was all in and out as they were really selling their excitement. And they shot shots across the bow. They said, yeah, we can talk smack too. We understand that. All of them made sure they understood where they were coming. They made sure that people understood that they have a band that is pretty damn good that they wanted to loose. And they talked about that they plan to make sure the band can make like all the way trips, or at least the majority of them. So they are coming to see what the other bands have to share. So I was like, wow, this is how you brand. We talk about the business side of this.
Yeah.
Wow. You have a right to be excited about this. And today is the official day. But if you're going to kick off a new chapter, and many of them said this is the next 100-year nexus in terms of this membership decision, You had all types of frameworks about going on. And don't let me forget, the National Alumni President, Colonel Gray, was there, and he had his moment of shine. And he knows how to go get the dollar. He makes Dr. Charles McCullin an honorary member of the Florida A&M National Alumni Association. And Charles
That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool.
I mean, they were brilliant. They had questions from the media, some really good question segments in there. So they did it right in terms of understanding how you rebrand this opportunity.
You know, Dr. Cavil, all I needed them to do was dim the lights and have Joe Bullock, the PA voice of the March 100. You know, your wait is over. From the highest of the 7 hills. I wanted something like that. That would have been dope too. So
I don't know. Now they did. Now talking about that, when they introduced Courtney Gaucher, I thought he was gonna get out there and slam dunk a basketball. They had, you know, and they paid homage to the president, the former president, Frederick Humphreys, in terms of his passing, but his legendary strike speech that he does. They played that. I was like, man, they had me hyped. And I'm just like, all right, now I'm excited about you being here. Now you're mortal enemies. We got to whoop your butt. But I was like, for a minute, I had to think twice. You know, you have a SWAC represented on the day. I was so excited about the way that Charles has put this together. So a lot of thought process goes in there. Any final thought in terms of the brand framework of what they put together about getting that information out? They got a parade plan. They had a strategic plate dinner where they were raising funds. And I think the minimum number of dollars to get you in the building was like $250, $200 to $250. I mean, they serious about the money there. They took some parting shots. They talked about the classic game against Jackson State and how they excited about that is coming. They went into the other sports, talking about getting ready to start the season in Miami and end the season in Atlanta for football, talking about planning to get to Birmingham for the men's and women's championships in basketball, that they plan to be there. They want to be a part of that celebration. I was like, wow, this is how you do it. Then a track athlete asked the question, and they showed out in track, talking about, yeah, we do that, a little bit of that track too. You be ready, because we got some track folks around here. We got some of the best facilities out here. I was like, oh my goodness, this is good. This is good. Somebody has learned about how to market these programs. Let me shift back to you and stay on this. Then we'll go into the break. We might tease out one other thing before we do that, but make your final thought process, not just in terms of them joining the SWAC and what does it mean for both FAMU and the SWAC. Shout out to Lee because he appropriately answered the question in regards to who needed who best. We won't recap on that, but you can go check that out on Instagram. Check out Charles Bishop on Instagram. Neely out there as they did that and resurrected it again because it was an appropriate time to put some shine on it. But I really want to think you tell us your framework about the business part of that and why that is so important, understanding when you have an opportunity to brand, you better make the most of it.
Yeah, you don't miss your shot. You do not miss your shot in terms of putting your stamp, if you will, out in the universe. And I thought Florida A&M did a tremendous job today with regards to the excitement that they're bringing to the conference, the swagger, just dripping with swagger from president on down. And I thought it was just very well done today in terms of that infusion of, you know, we're here, we're excited to be here. But guess what? We strike again. Be ready for it. So they have brought that brand awareness deal into the conference, and you know, and they put everybody on notice. So you appreciate all the excitement and swagger that Florida A&M brought to the Southwestern Athletic Conference today.
No doubt about it. Before we end this segment and go to our first break, I did want to acknowledge in terms of Bethune-Cookman. Lynn Thompson, as he's the retiring vice president of intercollegiate athletics at Bethune-Cookman. He had a significant letter in terms of how he approached that he released yesterday, their last official day in the MEAC. And he paid homage to all those that are associated about his period of time of being a part of the MEAC. And I thought that was a nice statement and gesture in terms of closing the final chapter in a way that really resonates with Bethune-Cookman and how they go about their business, that they are quiet in terms of how they do brand awareness, and they let their words and actions speak volume for itself in a lot of ways. And so, again, they had a brand opportunity they put out there, and I thought they did a great job in terms of branding that in that manner. And so I wanted to put a pin on that and make sure we got that out there. This is Dr. Bill's Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington, Charles Bishop. Stick with us. We're at the end of our first segment. Stick around. We'll come back with our second segment, and we'll go in the next direction of some of the other big news of the day. Not just week, but big news of the day.
It was a monumental game for A&M and Tampa. It was a monumental game. Somebody had to lose, and thank God it was them this time.
We knew it was going to be a battle. Look at Jake Gaither's record. 202 and 36, I think, some off-the-wall figures.
And nobody would play him because they didn't want to take a chance of getting beat. But the truth of it is,
over 46,000 tickets. Blacks were sitting in the east stands. The whites were sitting in the west stands, and the score wound up 34-28.
The only thing we proved that we wasn't inferior, that we were not inferior, and we were not afraid.
For one night, for 160 minutes, we was better than them.
It's like a loot machine. All around town, people trying to get down.
Thank you guys for what you do for HBCU athletics. This is a fantastic avenue for all of us. This is our ESPN, so we love what you guys do. Brian, AD, Roy, all you guys at BCSN. We really appreciate what it is that you guys do for us.
This is Dr. Bill with Inside HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington, Charles Bishop. Mike Washington is out on assignment. So, Charles, let's stick with this conference churning, all right? And the other big domino to fall, if you would, and it actually was announced before before FAMU and ultimately Bethune-Cookman leave the MEAC and go to the SWAC. You had North Carolina earlier this year that culminated with their last date being June 30th as well, but they leave the MEAC and they head to the Big South. So that was a big announcement. You can go to, if you would, HBCU Game Day, and they have an interview with the commission that is really intriguing in regards to some of the excitement they have about North Carolina A&T going into the Big South. And one of the frameworks, as you see, with being in the Big South, with things switch in terms of kicking it off with maybe the MEAC SWAC Challenge, certainly your goal of closing it out as an entrance of either the MEAC in terms of North Carolina A&T, previously FAMU, being able to represent the MEAC in the Celebration Bowl versus the SWAC entrance. Now you're talking about the FCS playoffs. What do you need to do to get that bid? Seeking the automatic bid or the at-large bid? So you talked about that. He also got into some branding frameworks of what that looks like in a little NIL. We'll save that a little more for later as our third segment, if you would, or the last segment, whichever you want to take it in that order. Talk about your thoughts in terms of North Carolina A&T becoming a member of Big South. What is your thought process in terms of that taking place in being the deal it was for today?
From an athletic standpoint, North Carolina A&T is the it school right now. And when you start taking a look at who they are, they're coming off a 2021 season. Get this, Dr. Bill, co-regular season championships of men's basketball, women's basketball, volleyball, softball, conference titles in women's basketball, volleyball, men's outdoor track and field. We talk about the football team, Celebration Bowl winners. The Big South has added a jewel that was in the HBCU community that is now transitioning over to the Big South. So there has to be an adjustment of the framework of the fan base to train your sights and sounds toward the FCS playoffs now. So I'm a fan of the Celebration Bowl, but I'm a fan of HBCUs in general. And like I said, North Carolina A&T, they got their Letterman jacket today from the Big South, and looking forward to them doing some great things because they have been a jewel over the past few years now, over probably the past 5 to 7 years with regards to athletics right down the board, from football all the way through to track and field. So excited to see what they are going to be able to do over there in the Big South.
Yeah, I thought it was fascinating in the interview when they started talking about the branding and the logo. So you saw that with FAMU, where you talked about them putting a shot of the basketball court where they have the SWAC logo. Well, the same was true for North Carolina A&T. The commissioner talked about heading down to Greensboro and checking out the North Carolina A&T in athletics, and they're having their meeting in terms of what that looks like. And part of the meeting was providing an update of some of the expectations in terms of being a part of the Big South. And many of these things are things that you do whatever conferences, but you have your unique cultural aspects associated with the Big South that are some business frameworks of what that looks like. So he talked about they already had the logo set up on the floor, getting ready as well, as you try to impress who's coming in there. But one of the things that I think is unique in this situation, and while you're supportive in terms of North Carolina A&T, in terms of HBCU, of them going to the Big South, and certainly want them to see them do well in that conference, along with Hampton for that matter, even Tennessee State and OVC, which is a longer historic moment that has taken place. But it's intriguing when you look at the culture, and in some ways there is a bittersweet part of this that it would be unfair for us to ignore in terms of what that looks like. You obviously have one way or the other looking at FAMU and Bethune-Cookman leaving the MEAC, or the divorce from the MEAC, along with North Carolina A&T leaving the MEAC, or divorce from the MEAC. But there is a different type of excitement with FAMU and Bethune-Cookman going to an HBCU conference versus A&T going to the Big South. And it's not to say anything negative, at least from my framework, about A&T, but their cultural representation is different, and that creates a different framework of how people accept it and how comfortable they are with it and how they voice that in terms of it. So there are some that are looking for them to do well and want to celebrate them, but there could be, in truth, some hurt in regards to feeling like that you're leaving the HBCU culture in some capacity. Obviously, you'll still be an HBCU and all that, the G-Hope, those things do not disappear, but they are divorced from the bigger landscape of HBCUs. And so that's a different framework, while you may see some differences about how the culture reverberates in terms of talking about that change. So what are your thoughts in terms of what that resonates and how that resonates with you?
Well, I think you touched on something really interesting there in terms of how the culture reacts to it. I think there's an excitement or a fervor, if you will, with Bethune-Cookman and Florida A&M, not just from the athletics, but from, we talk about the cultural aspect. The bands are a huge part of the HBCU culture. So not only do you get the athletics component, but you get the band community that gets to looking forward to these schools joining the SWAC. You lose a little bit of that with regards to A&T moving to the Big South. From an athletic standpoint, and I'm an athletics guy, I'm looking forward to the competition of what they are able to do within that framework of the Big South. But it's very noticeable when you're on social media to see, the excitement or everyone kind of talking about new day and age and the SWAC and things of that nature, and for it to not be as fervent, if you will, with regards to A&T going to the Big South. So that is something to kind of keep an eye on.
Well, we talked about FAMU announcing a 5-year deal with influence of becoming the second HBCU to include that platform. While we're talking about A&T and all the other accolades they did in terms of dominating the MEAC, at least specifically in this last year.
Exactly.
They have dominated in terms of a lot of the HBCU coverage, rightfully so. with the last chapter not quite being closed, what they did in track and field, both on the men's and women's side at the national level, and actually having some athletes that are going to go to the Olympics. So you talk about that framework in a lot of ways. It's fascinating that they were the first HBCU that signed the HBCU plus, if you would, influencers. Do not want to belabor the point because you had North Carolina Central that in terms of athletic organization joined influencer, as well as Bethune-Cookman. But in terms of the second component, as name, image, and likeness took place, the first one to jump on that and understand where the landscape was going was North Carolina A&T. So talk about some of the progressive steps of what North Carolina A&T is doing for the culture in regards to representing HBCUs, including the fact that the chancellor of North Carolina A&T was recognized by the Big South for becoming one of the executive committee members that was adjudicated in terms of HBCU game day during that interview. So I thought that was fascinating that they are fully engaging North Carolina A&T as they bring them into the conference in terms of having a seat at the table of not just a vote, if you would, but even more important as a voice of scenes. So it's gonna be intriguing to see what that looks like moving forward in so many different ways. How do you talk about the power of North Carolina A&T in terms of when we look at this from a business perspective, because that's what we're doing in a lot of ways with this show today, talking about the news, but how does it affect from a business perspective? What do you see about some of the positive things that North Carolina has done from a leadership perspective in so many different ways?
Well, I think, Dr. V, you kind of touched on, I think, something that's very important in terms of being visionary, if you will. When we're talking about this forest of name, image, and likeness, well, this was one of the first schools, to get out in front of and put something in place for their athletes as they move to this new conference. So, from a business standpoint, you're being a visionary in terms of kind of shaping the landscape versus reacting to what's happening within the landscape. So we talked Tuesday about, in some ways we just don't know in what direction this NIL will go with regards to HBCUs, but to see North Carolina A&T be proactive, that says a lot about their leadership. And then, like you mentioned, to have a voice at the table, I think that's huge, and that's something that can't go overlooked.
Let me give a shout out to some of those that follow us, our lab listeners in here for this lecture 152. Appreciate y'all. Wendy Jenkins Bishop, Kay Johnson is in the house. Reginald Johnson is doing his thing. Kevin Crawford, Jamie Walker, Lonnie Shaw, North Carolina A&T representing as always. Jamie Walker, as I said, FAMU, G Boom Holly representing Prairie View A&M. He talks about moving day in terms of some of the comments going on here. Donnie representing Texas, talking about howdy in his Texas voice. I love it. Jamie Walker says showmanship, the FAMU fits well with the SWAC in terms of what they have going on. So that's fascinating. Jerome Jeep Sutton, he's representing as well today. Chad Cooper is in the house saying what's going on. Jalen Riley is in the house. Alex Hines, Dr. Roderick Holmes is in the house. David Rhodes, Wendell Davis, brother Wendell Davis, representing 858. As I said, Ricky Burton is doing it big time. Who else do we have in here? David Rhodes, Chuck Hunt is always in the house. Just wanted to give the appropriate shout out for those lab listeners coming in and enjoying the lecture. Fred Whitted is in here. Arnold is on here as well. What else I got? James Knotts. I see you, representing in so many different ways. Keep the conversation going. Great comments out there as we get into it. So let me get back in the fold before we take this next break and come up to the second half of the show, if you would. Sticking with this name, image, and likeness. But before I get into more of the NCAA, I want to keep it from an HBCU perspective. What were your thoughts when you heard about Jackson State? And I'm sure that you heard a little bit about the rumblings and whistle as you kind of backslid and sent me that text off the record. But now it's official that it was coming in so many different ways. But Jackson State is in the mix. Coach Prime talked about this, about moving forward and taking advantage of this. And so what are your thoughts about Jackson State being the first, if not one of the first, which having a player being able to take advantage of the name, image, and likeness. What are your thoughts in terms of that going on?
Well, one of the things Coach Prime pointed to was this day, whenever that day might be, when athletes could take advantage of the NIL going in place. One of the other announcements that you saw today coming from Jackson State was SWAC Entertainment, which is a company started by Michael Strahan and Constance Schwartz-Marini, where they announced a partnership, if you will, student-athlete marketing commitments from Workforce Software, Simply Crowns, and Madison Healthplex. When you have a marketing master who happens to be your head coach, I think a lot of it Jackson State has really been looking forward to it. But I think HBCUs in general will get an opportunity, to really benefit from name, image, and likeness from a standpoint of businesses, branding themselves, the student athletes branding themselves as businesses that have always been around these HBCUs. So that's something I'm really looking forward to seeing. We talk about Dr. Villa Stamberger, being around Jackson State. Now these mom and pops, if you will, that we've often visited, they get an opportunity to brand themselves even more with the student athletes around that university.
And you've seen that before we close out on this section. You've seen the relationship between HBCU and its community in terms of what that looks like. Some of the smaller regional, local shops that are associated and really make their bottom line associated with that university. Now there's a way that they can inculcate themselves legally, even more so, not only with the institution or the athletic department, but individuals within the institution, from college athletes to college students, for that matter, in regards to understanding how that may reverberate even bigger. Although they could do that before, I'm sure there are going to be some frameworks of understanding how you can even really do that even more about your brand awareness associated. And then when we talk about the greater culture, about HBCU gear, or the fraternity and sorority paraphernalia, and how it intersects so many different ways with the HBCU culture. And what does that look like? It's hard to find a Greek shop that does not just carry Greek paraphernalia, that does not carry HBCU gear, if nothing else, but the local HBCU in that area in terms of what that looks like, or vice versa. You can't find a paraphernalia shop that focuses on an HBCU that does not carry Greek paraphernalia, if you allow me to use that framework. So I think it's important that you point that out from the business perspective of how all these things intersect. And it's interesting to see where that may provide some different connections with college athletes at HBCUs that you may not see with historically white colleges that may provide a quote unquote more mainstream framework of connecting with the name, image, and likeness. And that's not even to talk about the professional athletes like Master P in terms of what he may be able to get done for his son and other athletes in terms of that connection. So it's going to be fascinating to see what that means moving forward. So with that, let's take our next break. We'll be back for the second segment, and we'll tie in to a little more in terms of name, image, and likeness, and what you see coming in from the landscape from the NCAA that they almost were forced to go in this deal. So let's take a quick break before we get back into this. Dr. Cavil inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington and Charles Bishop. Stay with us. We'll be right back after this quick break.
Support the Black College Sports Network so we can continue to provide you coverage. Go to myjbn.com/support and be a part of the Black College Sports Network. Tell everybody they can follow their dreams.
It's never too early to plant the seed, to share the tradition, and instill a sense of pride in your HBCU with your little ones. HBCU Pride and Joy Children's Boutique helps you share your school spirit with a wide selection of adorable kids apparel and accessories officially licensed from your favorite HBCU. Visit hbcupridejoy.com and follow us on all social media at HBCU Pride Joy on Facebook and Twitter.
It's like a loop machine. All around town, people trying to get down.
Follow the Black College Sports Network on social media at MyBCSN1, the number 1, on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at MyBCSN1.
This is Dr. Cavil inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington and Charles Bishop. We're back from the break. I want to give a shout out to Roy. I saw the first break. We was talking so much about FAMU. I saw he snuck in that FAMU video. He did us some work and didn't sneak it back in there. But I see you, Roy. I mean, I see AD putting that in there. Great work as you do.
They brag differently.
Yeah, we see that noted by now. That's a good one. Let's skip
Dr. Cavil, that second one was Florida Memorial, the other school in Florida.
Right, that's why I was talking in that first one.
First one was FAMU, second one was Florida Memorial.
By the way, you sneak back in with the second one, you stay in Florida and you go with Florida Memorial. I see you're playing. I see you got a big plan. With that being said, as we get into this NCAA framework about name, image, and likeness, we talked about FAMU, the influencer, North Carolina A&T with the influencer connection, Jackson State in terms of that. Before I ask you about the NCAA and your thoughts overall, what does that look like, where they may be going next? Who do you think is the next HBCU that's going to sign with, whether it be influencer or somebody of the like? If you can put a pin on it, what is the next HBCU or two that you think is going to get a deal done?
I think when you take a look at Grambling and Southern, they're both big, huge, branded universities. You talk about a school like Grambling, there are so many people around the nation that associate the Southwestern Athletic Conference and Grambling, so I would expect them to get into the business realm of name, image, and likeness in terms of finding a good fit or finding a company that will benefit Grambling the most. And then Southern, of course, I think it will be another one. You talk about another well-branded institution. And, we're here in Houston, Texas Southern and Prairie View. I have no doubt that they should be able to find companies that will benefit them the most. So it's very interesting to see what direction that these schools will go in, and it doesn't have to all be answered July 1, but it will be very interesting to see over the next coming weeks, what is the best fit for universities in terms of how they go about partnering with third-party businesses that can best brand their athletes.
No doubt about it. Great point. When you talk about Southern and Grambling, I guess we might as well get into that dialogue now. We opened up the show talking about one of the big announcements was Grambling State Athletics is pleased to welcome Dr. Travion Scott, Vice President for Intercollegiate Athletics, played basketball at Southern University, rival to Grambling in so many different ways, obviously, and he was the Deputy Director of Athletics and CFO for Southern, but now he takes his own program and plan and stamp, you would imagine, on Grambling State's program. What are your thoughts in terms of his dynamic leadership? And he's been right on the edge. He's been right on the cusp. He's a front runner, if you would, for Prairie View's job. He was a front runner for Arkansas Pine Bluff's job. He was right on the cusp of who they wanted at Kentucky State and Southern was able to convince him to come back. He was one of the finalists for the FAMU job. So he's been literally right on the cusp for multiple jobs, and now he's at Grambling. I'm almost scared for those SWAC institutions that now have to deal with him in terms of him wanting to prove and show himself to some degree. That may be something considered. But even though, with all that being said, what are your thoughts in terms of this matchup and this relationship between Dr. Travian Scott and Grambling State University? Where do you see this going?
I mean, as always, you hope with any new hire with regards to vice president of intercollegiate athletics that the university gives him the tools that he needs to be dynamic. He has been a hot name, and we know he's been a hot name with regards to the HBCU rumor mill in regards to where his name has showed up in terms of getting that opportunity. And like you said, I would not doubt, huge chip on his shoulder, can't wait to prove his business acumen and what he can do with the brand that is Grambling State University. So really looking forward to it.
No doubt about it. Great point when you talk about, I'm fascinated. I think this is a great match between Grambling State and Dr. Travian Scott. He has a huge affinity for the SWAC. He knows the culture, but he's been groomed in terms of being prepared for this role. Grambling needs this next step, this new, younger, innovative type of transformational director of athletics, if you would, in this case, VP of Intercollegiate Athletics. Not to say anything negative about the previous individuals that had this role, and they had a lot of great things that they did. Most recently, Dr. Ponton, in terms of what he did with the cultural connections there. But it's fascinating to see, and with so many moving parts, with the nexus of what you're seeing at Jackson State, what you're seeing taking place with the new president of Texas Southern University, a vice president of intercollegiate athletics that is pushing it in the window. You have the new athletic director, Dr. Reed at Prairie View A&M University. You see what's going on, obviously, with FAMU and Courtney Gaucher. Bethune-Cookman is looking for an athletic director. You have Alabama State. So you have a lot of momentum going on, but you have Ashley Robbins at Jackson State that continues to push the envelope in terms of what they want to see for their athletic departments. I think it's fascinating in so many ways of what you see with this potential relationship going forward. I think it's going to be extremely positive.
Yeah, I'm always curious, Dr. Cavil, are there various components to this grooming process to becoming an athletic director? I think that's something a lot of fans are always curious about.
I have my personal belief of what I've done, and it's been more from a consulting perspective of what I think are good matches. First, let me level set this and say, traditionally what I've seen with athletic directors is when we talk about grooming, the first groom that you do is that you have to be inside these organizations from an NCAA association. It is very challenging and difficult to come from outside of athletics and come and be able to get involved in athletics. Not so much because you don't have the skill sets, because I think skill sets are transferable from any executive level job to another executive level job. But the NCAA has insulated itself in such a way that people visualize athletics in such a way that you have to have those checkboxes, if you would, and which is one of the reasons why it's so challenging for even those that have been in the athletic world and had leadership roles at NEIA programs to be able to come into NCAA programs. It's even challenging for that. So imagine trying to come from outside that, or coming from even professional organizations. It's hard to be able to transfer it in there because they've insulated themselves for the good, bad, or indifferent. We can look at that from many different perspectives about that. You almost have to be groomed from inside to do it. Now, personally, what I see, what I look at from an HBCU director of athletics or VP of athletics is somebody that, one, understands the culture. I believe it is extremely important to understand the culture of HBCU. That doesn't mean that you have to come from an HBCU to understand it, but you have to have a expectation, if you would, or a framework about yourself, a disposition, I should say, in many ways, that allows you to be amenable to understand that every organization has its own culture, and to some degree, that could be unique for HBCUs. So you need to be reticent about that, about having appreciation for it. It doesn't mean that you can't triangulate and pivot in different directions, but not to understand that could make the roadblocks about you associating yourself with the partnership about what that makes that done. We've seen that in a lot of ways with Courtney Gaucher. He didn't come necessarily from an HBCU, although he had family members that have done that. So he has some appreciation for that. And he has a uniqueness about the culture. It doesn't mean that he doesn't think there's some things that we can do better for HBCU.
Sure.
He is showcased about doing that. So I'm not saying that you have to be from an HBCU, but I think it's important that you understand the uniqueness that I say is not a weakness to HBCUs, but in a lot of ways, if you understand it and cultivate it, it can actually be a strength. And it's certainly at least an opportunity and definitely not a threat. And so as I break down that quick SWOT analysis for your all out, I did that in framing it. But I say all that to say in so many different ways, it's important to understand that connection. And secondly, where I think some institutions or ADs could do a better training, you're starting to see that a little more with many of them having doctorates, so they at least should have that academic background of really understanding the business side of sports and athletics in itself, and how much it's important to not just go through it and think you understand it, but understanding it more from a scientific, humanistic, if you would, and cultural perspective of what that means about understanding the true framework about the business.
No doubt about it. We'll probably pick up Dr. Cavil here. There you go.
Yeah, for a Bachelor of Science in Sport Management. And as you finished with the Masters of Science in Sports Studies and Sports Leadership, and now we're proud to be able to say that we're the first HBCU that has a concentration in the athletic field, which is a concentration in sports education. It's connected with our EDD program and curriculum instruction. So we're fascinated about that. We're also getting in the framework where we do certificate programs. We have a doctoral minor, the students that are doing other doctoral programs that are interested in at least having the connection, and where we do a minor in sports studies. So we are at the vanguard of training individuals to understand from a very high academic perspective, the business side of sports. With that, let me take our last break of the show. This is Dr. Cavill's Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Watson and Charles Bishop. Stick with us because we'll be right back to do our last segment of HBCU programs. We'll be right back after this quick break.
Your ad could be ran here. MyJBN.com/support. MyJBN.com/support for more information.
This is Ryan Fulford. AD Drew and I are co-hosts of the BCSN Sports Lab. We talk about all things related to HBCU athletics. From the games, teams, coaches, and fan interest stories, we cover it all. You can find our shows on Facebook at BCSN Sports Lab, YouTube at MyJBN Online, and everywhere you listen to podcasts like Anchor, Spotify, Google, and Apple Podcasts. You can also find the show on the Jericho Broadcast Network's app. Make sure to download. We look forward to you joining the conversation and being a part of the show.
Have you had your Earthblend coffee today? At Earthblend Coffee, we take pride in offering you the very best of beans across the world, blended and roasted to perfection, giving you superior quality and satisfying and flavorful taste. Experience the world in one cup with Earthblend Coffee.
Majesty is a premium health and wellness tea line focused on bringing delicious yet healthy tea blends to the community. Filled with an abundance of vitamins and antioxidants, we work to blend teas with exotic spices and fruits to produce scrumptious and wholesome beverages. So check us out at mymajesties.com. That's MyMajesties.com. My Majesties, an Urban Passport member.
Support the Black College Sports Network so we can continue to provide you coverage. Go to myjbn.com/support and be a part of the Black College Sports
Tell everybody they can follow their dreams.
This is Dr. Cavil with Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington and Charles Bishop. We're really getting into the big news of the day, but we're doing it from a business perspective. What does all this mean in terms of that? On LinkedIn, I talked about the HBCUs, particularly SWAC, the history part of it, and how the expansion, the conference churning with FAMU and Bethune-Cookman has already paid dividends for the SWAC. And so it's fascinating when you talk about this business perspective. But I know you wanted to pivot in terms of a different perspective of how you wanted to talk a little bit more about the business associated with HBCU at this time. Where did you want to go with that?
Well, the student athlete themselves, in terms of how they go about this new world, if you will, of name, image, and likeness, and the things that they have to do to make themselves marketable, especially when you talk about their social media footprint, their social media presence. We talk about it in business all the time in terms of a LinkedIn profile and making sure that your social media presence is something that's representative of you, or that you want businesses to see. Well, now from an athletic perspective or an athlete framework, you have to be, number one, take care of the main thing on the field, but you also have to make sure that your social media presence is one where a company would want you to endorse them. So that, I think that's an interesting framework that, you know, athletes are going to have to kind of take a look at, potentially cleaning up their social media imprint.
No doubt about it. When you talked about engaging with businesses, not only do you represent your own brand that we say all individuals have, but in this case, we're specifically looking at the college athletes, and then you're going to merge that brand with another brand association. There are going to be things that they're going to look at as well in terms of what that represents. You see some of the HBCU presidents that have a great engagement on social media platforms, whether president over at Dillard, the president at Edward Waters, let me get that out there correctly. And they just had a huge brand announcement that is from an academic perspective, which is huge, where they have transitioned the name of the institution from Edward Waters College to Edward Waters University. And academically, that means that they're introducing more graduate programs to be able to transition and moving their institution from a college to university. So they're growing academic programs, which means now, like at Texas Southern University, you have colleges and schools within the university and then departments. Now that you move up from the college perspective to university, which we heard from Houston-Tillotson College a couple of years ago, with them moving from Houston-Tillotson University. We just talked about Bethune-Cookman. For a while, they were referred to as Bethune-Cookman College. They moved from Bethune-Cookman University. That is significant in terms of the brand recognition of what your institution means from an academic perspective and how that will resonate with students that have an interest to come into your institution. But it doesn't just stop with students, whether those students that are coming in from an academic perspective or a student in terms of college athletes that are coming in both from an academic and athletic perspective, but also your ability to retain staff. And even more importantly, faculty, in terms of faculty that may resonate with moving to an institution in terms of what they can get done, not just at the undergraduate, graduate level with graduate programs and their interests of being connected, moving from Edward Waters College to Edward Waters University. So you're right on the point when you talk about what does this mean, understanding your brand recognition and its attachment to the social media platform, particularly for college athletes now that they have this opportunity and want to take advantage of it. Their ability to navigate that space is certainly important. And it's not something they can't do. These are very capable and intelligent folks, but being aware of that is going to be very important and extremely connective to where they want to go in terms of engaging their brand and building. And one of the reasons I think that this is so important, we always talk about the expectation for many college athletes or previously high school athletes about understanding that there's a limited time that they have the ability to do this, because most of them won't go on to be professional athletes. And even that is relatively a short window. So this is one of the times that they can calculate the most off of the brand awareness and connection of their name, image, and likeness. And this can have proverbial lifelong connections and effects. So it's so important to be able to take advantage of this opportunity that they well deserve. And I'm not saying this in any facet that this is something that they are given. This is something that they have earned. But when you have earned that, obviously, you must take advantage of keeping up with it. Last thing I'll do is I'll let you have a closing moment and remarks of how you want to close out the business perspective of all things that took place this week, namely today, in such a phenomenal and day in so many different ways for HBCUs in terms of the total HBCU sports culture. What are your thoughts?
It's a watershed, a moment in history for the Southwestern Athletic Conference. And I think, Dr. Cavil, you had a post where, you talk about a new era. So we've just completed the first 100 years of the SWAC. And with the addition of Florida A&M and Bethune-Cookman, we're now starting on that next era, that next 100 years of the Southwestern Athletic Conference. So it's a huge day. Watershed moment for North Carolina A&T, moving over to the Big South in terms of what they want to do with their brand over there in that conference. And a watershed moment in college athletics in general. 5 years ago, I don't know if I saw this day coming where athletes would be able to use their name, image, and likeness. I'm a huge fan of the NCAA college football game, and it broke my heart when that game was no longer produced. But it was a situation where I understood why. So now we get an opportunity to have these athletes, rightly so, I think, benefit from their name, image, and likeness. So looking forward to what these athletes are able to parlay that into.
No doubt about it. Great closing thoughts. Thank you for listening to Inside HBCU Sports Lab. Make sure you share our podcast with your friends and colleagues. I am Dr. Kenyatta Cavil, the Dean of HBCU Sports, coming from inside the lab in the College of HBCU Sports with Mike Washington and Charles Bishop. We hope you enjoyed our dialogue today about the business of HBCU sports, the business of sports in general, particularly as it influenced such a significant and huge day on the landscape for HBCUs and the like. Again, we want to thank you for listening to Dr. Cavil's Inside HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington and Charles Bishop every Tuesday and Thursday right here at 6 o'clock. We look forward to next week as we will discuss the latest news in the lab. Follow me, Dr. Kenyatta Cavil, on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. That's DrKenyattaCavil. That's DrKenyatta. Inside HBCU Sports Lab 1, that's on Twitter. Inside HBCU Sports Lab on YouTube and Facebook. Dream big and continue to move forward. We will talk with you soon. Course.
Lecture.
My dismiss.